let me briefly introduce IPython. Although most of you have used it already, maybe you don't know all the things that IPython can do, neither do I. IPython, the interactive Python shell, wasn't Python always interactive? They thought it wasn't interactive enough. So they decided they would add more features to IPython. And actually the very first thing that exists was the IPython shell. Like you see here on the left. It's basically when you call IPython from a console, you get these input cells in front of it. You actually get auto-completion already on your basically a regular console. You can use that everywhere, including your supercomputer through SSH. I actually use IPython quite a bit. IPython also adds magic, and we'll talk a little bit more about that just on the next slide. The next one that actually came up almost in parallel to the first IPython notebooks that you'll be using here was the JUPYTER QTCONSOLE, or IPython QTCONSOLE at the beginning, which looks like a console or like a terminal, but actually also allows to include graphics. You can have LaTeX formula rendered, but it's not quite as flexible as the notebooks, where you can also add notes and comments and easily save a session and pass it on to somebody else. You still get your auto-completion, actually now also with docstring pop-ups. So both of these are quite useful, but not what we'll be mostly using in the course. But we will be using the IPy kernel, which is basically the tools that are behind IPython, Jupyter notebooks, at least with the Python kernel and so on. Two of the important features are magic and help. First of all, there's the magic command, and one of the magic commands all start with a %sign. And one of the magic commands actually lists the magic commands that are available. ls-magic. And notice here it says available line magics and available cell magics. The line magics all act on the line they are on, so on everything that is following. The cell magic acts on an entire input cell. If we were, well, you'll see in the notebooks later. You notice there's quite a few of them. We won't be talking about all of them. You'll look at some of them. This one we'll definitely look at. Write file, we'll look at the TIMEIT here, which was broken over 2 lines. Definitely both in cell and line magic. We'll look at CD and things like that. These are commands that are not available in regular Python notebooks. Another very useful one that I don't think I actually put on here is the exclamation point. An exclamation point lets you execute a command as if you had entered it into a terminal, with the advantage that you can use the output. You'll see that later in the notebooks. All of the magics come with help. Help is done simply by adding a question mark at the end of the command, and will give you a help overview for this command. This doesn't just work for the magic, but also works for Python commands. One of my favorite magics is actually TIMEIT. I used it already in the previous notebooks for timing my dot product. TIMEIT lets you, in this case, take a cell. So it would actually time for n equal 1 this list comprehension, which generates just one uniform random number, and it takes 622 nanoseconds. How did it come up with this? Well, it actually did 7 runs with 1 million iterations of this each, measured the 1 million operations, divided it by the time that it took, and the mean and standard deviations are actually done over those 7 runs. It will adjust the number of loops that it does depending on how long an operation takes. So you can both time fairly slow and fairly fast operations. IPython can plot. It easily integrates with matplotlib, both in the notebooks, but also in general with the IPython shell, as long as you have X available. And in QTCONSOLE, you can actually integrate it. And the easiest, here we too use a magic, matplotlib inline, which tells it to actually do it inline within the notebook. We can even change the output format. So instead of displaying PNG files, which it does by default, we can set the format, for example, to PDF or SVG. Who has used matplotlib before? I thought so. Matplotlib plots can show up in IPython notebooks, and they are simply plotted. They can include LaTeX commands, like these fractions here. You'll see the plot later in your notebook. IPython also keeps track of your directory, well, of your history in general. You can access outputs from previous cells. So for example, here I just generated a NumPy random array. I didn't assign it to anything. It's just hanging there. Well, I can do this in the next line, and now this random array actually is assigned to the variable A. That's what the underscore does. It assigns the output of the previous cell to a variable. Underscore also works. 3 may also work. Actually, you can put a number behind it. But at that point, I actually usually do this. I take the number of the output, in this case it was 15, and assign it. You can log your work, so you can actually store everything that you do while you're doing it to a file. With the notebooks, this is kind of done anyway, because the notebook itself stores it. You can turn off and turn on the log. I hardly ever use that feature, I admit. I usually work through my, well, if I do something like that, I probably do data analysis. I work until my data analysis works, then pick the lines that I want and save those. You can also look at the variables that are available with, or that are in the current namespace with who. So there should be our A here somewhere. But notice it also, for example, shows NumPy and its alias NP. You can get much more detail on these variables with whos. Now it actually tells you that NP is a module, whereas A here is an ND array. And you can clear your namespace and do a couple of other things that you'll see in the notebook. All right, who doesn't have a Jupyter Lab notebook yet, or who doesn't have the screen yet?
Should be 5 people. Yeah.
Okay.
Or they have logged into a login node instead of a batch node. But
okay.
there are 5 people who are missing on the batch nodes.
Well, they'll be in trouble with the Dask notebooks, but otherwise it should work. No.
How do we get those files back? I don't have a bin folder.
Just a second, I'm getting to that now. All right, from within the notebook, you can actually open up a terminal. You can either scroll here in the launcher to terminal, or you go to File, New, Terminal. All right, the notebooks that you need today, you'll find in this account. So you could do a tilde train 143, or you can just do this entire path. These are the notebooks that you'll need for today. So you could get them with a copy -r train 143 notebook. HPC Pi 18 notebooks to your local directory.